Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this talk. 9 o'clock, well, is when we started on a Saturday morning. That's incredible dedication, and I will do all I can to make it totally worth your while. My name's Jennifer Dannenfelser, and I started my company, Mind Guide Learning, in 2013. I was a Montessori teacher before then. And I fell in love with etymology, which is word origin teaching, at that time. Now, let me make sure that I want to present full screen. Okay. Are you seeing this? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, now let me make sure I can move it. Yes, I can. Okay, last time I couldn't move my slides. All right. So, supporting older dyslexic students in the classroom. I want to start by saying that these methods are going to support all of your students. There's been research that proves that using morphology and etymology will help students who are learning English as a second language. And likewise, it helps students who are native English speakers learn other languages because we're talking about word origins that are used across languages. Um, I also wanted to share a little story about what made me fall in love with morphology. In Montessori classrooms, I would teach lower elementary for second and third graders about types of angles. So the acute angle, the obtuse angle, the right angle, and we taught etymology then. And I said to them, okay, so you look at the acute angle, it's really pointy. And did you know that the word acute came from the Latin root aquare? So aquare meant arrow. So whenever you think of an arrow, you can think of an acute angle. And the retention really, really was strong for these students. So, and then when I got my Orton Gillingham training, I, like so many classroom teachers, did not have the resources to help my kiddos who were struggling with dyslexia. So I took a gap year, I got Orton Gillingham training, and I had so much demand for just trying to find a practicum student that I realized that I should just go for it. And I've been doing Mind Guide ever since. So, our struggling language learners. You may have heard as an educator in 2024, the National Assessment of Educational Progress came out, and the average reading score was the lowest in the history of the assessment, which began in 1992. 32% of high school seniors scored below basic, which means that they were not able to find details in a text to help them understand its meaning, right? So we're really at a kind of crisis level, and anything we can do, anything creative, just try it out, see if it works. We really need to kind of ratchet up our strategies here to help reach all these learners. So before I get into etymology, excuse me, I want to just touch on strategies for all students, general strategies that you can use. We want to use word study across the disciplines because like it helps learning different languages, Spanish, French, English, it also helps us learn the language of science. It helps us learn the language of sociology. So we can help our students in comprehension, not just in our ELA classes, but in every class. So for example, the prefix peri, P-E-R-I, we're going to learn that prefix in geometry when we learn perimeter. Peri means around and meter means to measure. So perimeter means to measure around. And in biology class, we may come across the word pericarp. Peri means around and carp means flesh. So we can we can understand then the meaning of pericarp to mean the flesh that's around the fruit, right? So that's one small example. We can teach comprehension strategies, such as using graphic organizers to help students identify main and supporting ideas, Venn diagrams. A lot of kiddos that have dyslexia, they're using so much of their, cognitive bandwidth in decoding, right? And that having these strategies, having something that helps them see the bigger picture in a shape or in a hierarchy is really helpful for their comprehension. And then if you haven't heard of Newsela or ReadWorks or CommonLit, these are all really well-known quality trusted resources for using graduated reading levels. So Newsela is a news um, website, current events website for students. And there's a drop-down menu, and you can just have the same article, you know, in sixth grade reading level and ninth grade reading level, and share it amongst your students so that everyone there's no longer this barrier to subject matter that there was for dyslexic students before we were able to take a more sophisticated idea. Like maybe we're teaching them about breakthroughs in genetic engineering, right? Not something you're going to learn in third grade, but they're at a fifth grade reading level, right? You can set that content at the fifth grade reading level and give it out to them, and they can follow. And I think that that's fabulous. So next is making sure our typical accommodations are in place with 504s and IEPs. So audio supports, if headsets are available, make sure we're using them. If they need noise canceling headphones to concentrate, let's hand those out. Speech to text can be a lifesaver for some of these kiddos and just getting their main idea down. And then they might need some help editing it down because they're not perfect and they do create spelling mistakes. Scribing to write dictated responses, and then allowing students to follow, to give oral responses to written tests and giving them extended time. These are all examples of modifications and accommodations that you might find on a special education plan. Okay, getting into the details of providing explicit vocabulary instruction through morphology. Um, we, sorry, um, many students are going to find meaning through context clues in the text, and they're going to be using the vocabulary, their existing knowledge, to infer the meaning of unfamiliar words. But explicit vocabulary instruction will help them develop these skills of inference much further. And they learn about morphology because half the words in the English language contain more than one morpheme. So think about the word restarted. Restarted actually has three morphemes. A morpheme, its definition is just the smallest unit of language that has meaning. So the two letters RE put together, that's a morpheme. Re means again. So to restart something means to start it again. And restarted has the ED, and that tells us that something was started again in the past. So we can see exactly how complex our language is by breaking it down into these units of meaning. And then those units of meaning can be applied in other arrangements, in other words, very much like different letters can be used in different words. And it also, once they can identify these bits of language, it helps them to look at a long word and be able to see it as a series of shorter words that they already know, right? Which is extremely empowering to them. So, excuse me. I think I'll just move on to the next slide. So here's an example, another one. So bio means life, and they're going to learn in their biology class. Well, as so many students do now, they truncate it. They just call it bio, right? So that they'll know that that little bit of language that they're saying actually means life. And that when they see that little bit of language combined with other roots, right? So they'll see biography. It's a different pronunciation. And that is another important thing to realize that we have to teach the pronunciation changes as well. Biology, biography, right? So that might sound different, or biology, biography, that's the same. But there are other examples. Sorry, I've been talking for an hour and a half that you can see the pronunciation changes. A little bit of research. I'm not going to talk too much about research, but in 2024, DePaul University did a dissertation, published a dissertation that demonstrated that explicit morphological instruction on Latin roots significantly improved sixth graders' ability to decode and infer meanings of morphologically complex words, compared to vocabulary only instruction. So compared to only giving a definition of a certain word and studying words as distinct units one at a time, right? Or studying them as groups of words that apply to a certain concept but are not related to one another morphologically. So that's one study. I have four different studies in my notes. I have a Google Doc where I have collected lots of wonderful, juicy information with activities and research and so on. So high school, also, lots and lots of research. If you ever go to just go to Perplexity and type this in, you will find oodles of validation for this. So the high school level, there is a link in the resources to a guide that's called Explicit Morphology Instruction to Improve Overall Literacy Skills in Secondary Students. That's a very long title, but it is full of references to research about the efficacy of this, and it also has some usable activities. So speaking of activities, we're going to start just reminding them what a syllable even is. They may have heard of this when they were in lower elementary, but if we don't remind them of what a syllable is and what a vowel is and what a consonant is, they're not going to remember. So we need to just remind them every syllable, what is it? Every syllable has a vowel. Some syllables have only a vowel, right? What are the consonants? And how do they function in words? How do we define those? We also need to teach stressed and unstressed syllables. Unstressed syllables are often pronounced as the schwa, like in the word banana. That's the same letter pronounced two different ways. In the word family, it's not fam-illy or fam-ily, it's fam-ily. So that's a schwa. It's a very kind of lazy sounding vowel, right? So when we have those lazy sounding vowels, often those are the unstressed syllables, right? Stressed syllables can change with morphological complexity. This was the point I was trying to make before, but the example wasn't perfect. Look at the word magic, right? When we add the suffix IAN, meaning a person who does something, then it becomes magician. The stress of the syllable changes. Magic, the stress is in the first syllable. Magician, the stress is in the second. So even understanding that can help a student decode and find, oh, I know that word, right? This word is not magician, right? It's the word magic, but it sounds different. Nation, national. Nation has a long A. National has a short A sound, right? So pointing these things out can help. Syllable division. If anyone has had any training in Orton-Gillingham or explicit phonics instruction, you will already know all about this. There are 6 different rules. If you're thinking there's no way I have time to introduce this into my classroom, 6 different rules, I do have another solution for this a little later in the lecture that I learned from a podcast. But this, if you do have time and if you want to go ahead and tackle it in your classroom, I have included in the resources a link to some trusted resources that have lessons for you to teach these. They are consonant, vowel, consonant, open syllable, robot, table. It's going to help them decode. They know it's not robot. They're going to understand the meaning of the word more quickly because they will recognize it. So magic E, or sorry, not magic, that's what we say in OG, but silent E, R controlled, vowel team, and final stable syllable consonant LE. Those are all of the syllable division rules that we have in our language. Having them makes them able to identify the parts, and they can't identify the meanings unless they can identify the parts. So explicitly teach the rules for adding suffixes. again, it doesn't seem like it should matter that much, but it really does in terms of helping students to decode and understand. So look at this word at the bottom. The three rules are drop the E when adding a suffix that starts with a vowel, double your consonants when adding a vowel suffix to a consonant vowel consonant syllable with a short vowel, and then change Y to an I. So if a student doesn't know, they're looking at beautify, they don't know that there was once a Y where the I is, they might look at Beau and say, okay, bow, or they might just look at all three of those vowels together and give up because who knows, but they might not realize that it's a common non-phonetic word. And they might try and decode tiffy. But because they understand the rules of syllable division, the word beauty will come to mind because they know that it's been dropped and changed into an I. The Y has been dropped and changed into an I. Okay, we want to derive the meaning of unfamiliar words through etymology, and this is where the fun begins. Etymology is essentially the study of word origins, and um, this is the most interesting part, in my opinion. So, and if you're at all into history, then this could also become very interesting to you. So there's something called structured word inquiry. It is easy to find information on it, but again, there is not really a set scope and sequence. There is not really an instructional manual that you can buy, but there's a lot of interesting information about how to use this method for unpacking multisyllabic words. And essentially, there is a tool called Etymonline. Again, link in the resources. You can take any word, type it into Etymonline, and it will break it down for you and tell you the word origins, even give you examples of this word from other languages, right? It's fascinating. You could do so much here. You could even talk about geography. You could talk about world history. It's so interesting, right? And I realize maybe not to everyone, maybe not to your students. And that's another, that's a different whole conference altogether. But I think that again, back to the cross, um, the subject matter crossover. Let's look at light. Photograph, everyone knows that word. They might be taking an art class, right? Photoelectric, photogenic. Photosynthesis is something they're going to learn in biology class, and a photon is something that they're going to learn in physics. So knowing that these words have the prefix meaning light. Many of us don't think of photo as a prefix. We learn some prefixes when we're in lower elementary. We learn un means no, we learn re means again, and that's it. We don't learn many more. But there are so many more prefixes and so many more suffixes, and we can put them all together in one word. Here's an example of something to do for fun. Um, make word lists and make more word lists, but make it interesting, make it interactive, make it engaging. You could have a word wall in your classroom that changes every week. You could have a morpheme of the week, put it in the trunk of the tree, give the students some post-it notes and have them write their words and stick it up on the tree. You could hand out sheets or that have these tree trunks and branches on it and have them each make their own and then hang all of them up. You can let's keep going here. I've got some other examples. This is a word matrix. There is an app for this, believe it or not. There is a website that's called Mini Matrix Maker, and it's in the resources. What you do is you find a word, a root word, in this case, cell, you find the meaning of it. Cell means a small room. And it actually started to be used because of monks who were carving their living quarters into stone walls, and they started to call them cells. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting. And it also means to hide. So you type root words in, and then you type in little examples of the words with plus signs between the prefixes and suffixes, and it spits out this visual for you that you can use. And then you can have your students see how many words they can make, right? How many words can they make with this? And that word, that suffix euler in the end, um, it actually means, relating to or resembling the noun, whatever the root is. So this could spin off into a study about all the words that we can think of that have euler. What about molecular? What about regular, circular, singular? There's vascular, that relates to biology. Muscular, angular, that relates to geometry. So I think that if you're in a situation where you can make brainstorming fun and even just accepting words that are guess words, right? Have them make up words that have euler as an and kids love playing with language, and especially now. And most of our language is getting sort of chopped up into little bits, but if we can get them to take those little bits and add other parts, that could be fun. This is a multi-syllable word maker where if you have a situation where you can get these made or you can put them on a shelf or then the students can use these. And it's fun to make up nonsense words. Like, for example, what about if we made the word ad portus? So port means to carry, right? And add means um, to add to or toward. So an OUS means possessing or characterized by. So if I had the word ad portus, what would that mean? That would mean that I have a word that means to move towards carrying, characterized by moving something towards something else. That would be ad portus, right? So any game that you can think of that would engage students in this way, I think they enjoy the nonsense aspect of it, and would have a lot of fun making up nonsense words. This is a word web that comes from some material that is linked in the resources, explicit morphology instruction to improve overall literacy skills in secondary students. That's there for you in the back or in the Google Doc. This is a very similar thing to using the tree, but we're focusing only on one word and all the different aspects of that word. So we're going to use prefixes, roots, and suffixes. Part of speech, very important. Suffixes change the part of speech. Any word ending in the suffix ly is an adverb, right? I softly brushed the dog. I quickly jumped up from my seat. Anytime you have ly. So even if a student doesn't know any other part of the word, if they see the ly at the end, at least they know that it's describing the action. And that is helpful. It can be the difference between having them completely give up and having them say, okay, at least I know this about it. I'm just going to move on to the next word and see, how it goes. So, oh boy. Now I am trying to move. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I found another cool thing in all of my researching and looking around on, even social media groups about this topic. There is a website called bingobaker.com, and you can type anything that you want into the Bingo Baker app, and it will spit out these bingo cards for you, and you can download it as a PDF. So what I did here was I changed the free word in the middle to the root VIS, which means to see, like visible. And then I just had it randomly place all of those affixes around it. And there also is a sheet that has little slips. So you can randomly choose an affix and have your students mark it on their bingo card. So then whoever gets bingo first, whoever gets 5 across first, they can see how many words they can make, right? Are they real words? Are they not real words? Are they nonsense words? Maybe you can have it so if you get to bingo, you get maybe a few kids that get to bingo. The first three kids that get to bingo, we're going to see who can make more real words. And if you can make more real words, then you win the game. So if I were to get, if you look on the bingo card on the right side, where underneath of the N, if I got NAGE, NOUS, NVIS, I could say, okay, I can make the word visible and I can make the word visage, right? Visage is a much less common word, but it is in fact a word, and that will help with vocabulary building. Okay, I had mentioned when I suggested that we do syllable division that there was a podcast, and it is linked in the resources. It's a great little podcast. And these two folks are researchers, Jessica Tost and Brendan Chandler. They have a whole podcast about the ways that they do syllabication in older students. So instead of teaching every single syllable division rule, one of the hallmark of a syllable is that it has to have a vowel. So if you just go through and underline every vowel in your word and talk about the sound it makes. So industrialization was the example that I came up with. We have I for in, for dustry, and then for al, I, long A, and then IO. Now, once you underline them all, you need to decide, do they make a vowel team or not? And if you look at the two vowels that are first together, industrialization, they are not a vowel team. Each of those vowels makes a separate sound. The I says E, and the A and AL says which is a schwa. And the reason they are not a vowel team is because of the rules of adding suffixes. So we took the Y away from industry and we changed it into an I. Another interesting thing about this word, I'll show you on the next slide. So, so we underline the vowels, we count them, we decide whether or not they are teams. And then once we do that, we can circle the known morphemes. Maybe there are some morphemes that we don't know. I wasn't sure when I did this, when I examined this word, if the root was dust or if indust was the root. So I didn't know whether to count it as one part or two parts. And in fact, I was wrong. I thought maybe in would be the prefix in as in enable or inadequate, but it is not, in fact, a prefix in this case. So the root, this over here, this excuse me, rectangle with all the words I'm not going to read, that comes from Etymonline. It's an example of what it will give you when you type in the word. It talks about its connection to all different languages, and there's even more that I didn't screenshot there. So industry comes from the Proto-Indo-European, that's PIE, Indu. So the prefix is really Indu, not in. And it means in or within, and it comes from the Latin struere, which means to build. So the word indust comes from those two roots. And then a lot of people don't know AL is actually a suffix. It is. AL is a suffix with a distinct meaning that means relating to or having the form of, right? Like you can even think of like nasal, your nasal AL is a suffix and nase is the root. So you can think of all kinds of words that end in AL, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, those words all are describing something. They're all also adjectives. So then eyes, words ending in IZE, always a verb because IZE means to make or to cause something to become like something else. When we know that words ending in IZE are always verbs, our comprehension improves. Then we're switching again because it has a third suffix, ation. Ation indicates every word that ends in ation is a noun. They're not concrete nouns. They're often abstract nouns, and you can talk about the difference between a concrete and an abstract noun. So ation means indicating an action, process, state, or condition or result. Okay, so let's break this down. This is a very complicated word. And industrialization is a process that makes or causes something to have the form or character of industry, which means to have this concept of building within. So an inherent quality of building. So I don't know. I just get really excited. I don't know if your students will, but get really excited. So word history can help. We only have 12 minutes remaining. I'm going to be quicker about this. To look at the words fasten and hasten, these are considered irregular words. And a lot of like the OG folks, their irregular word systems are just teach them and tell them they have to memorize them, that there's no rhyme or reason. But there actually is a rhyme or reason, because if you look at fasten and hasten, you know en is actually a suffix, right? Then you know that you can break it apart into fast and en and haste and en, right? And so that makes it easier to understand why there is a T, in these words at all. And then once you understand there's a T and what it means, so fast, if you look up in Edym Online, it tells you that the root of fast is from the Old English, which means to secure, right? Now, kids always think of fast as being having to do with speed, but this is another meaning of the word fast. So wouldn't have necessarily understood that this fast meant to secure something. Haste means to do something quickly. Now, why is the A long in haste? Well, there was an E there. It still doesn't follow the silent E rule, because those double consonants would negate that silent E if you know all these rules. But at least it helps us understand why the word is spelled the way it is. And it also, tells us that the T remains there so that we can connect that word to its original meaning. And then we can make word families. And we can see, if you look in the case of moist, moisten, there's no T sound in moisten. And moisture, the T starts to make a CH sound. But they're all in the same family. And this is why people who are really, really into structured word inquiry will say Orton Gillingham fails our students, because we cannot decode everything. There has to be another layer of meaning and another way to interpret. Okay, so if you are still not sold on the value of using morphology, I wanted to share this example of a student's misunderstandings in a pre-test. That comes from a resource called Word Mapping, which is from 2008, but I still included it in the resources because it has really cool activities that you can do. And I love the fact that it has a pretest, right? It has a formative assessment in it, which is hard to find for this type of thing. Okay, so you can see this kiddo in the top. They put male dictating for malediction, which of course that's a very common word. You see mal, you think male. But because the student does not know that mal is a prefix meaning bad, they can't extract the meaning of the word, right? So DICT means to say, like dictating or dictation or edict or predict. We can make a whole list of words that have DICT. But in the end, we can find, let's focus on mal, right? We could talk about listing words with mal, and we have malnutrition, right? We have malpractice. We have malfunction, right? So then anytime they're going to remember that anytime they see this mal, they're not going to think male again, hopefully. And remit, the root is mit, which means to send. But because the kiddo doesn't know the rules for attaching suffixes, they think that the double T is part of the root, which it is not, right? So the root is mit. They added the double T because OR is a suffix beginning with a vowel. So this student thinks about mittens when in fact the root is mit. So, and also it can be MIS. You can get into that later. Mit, so transmit, transmission. That's the same root, complicated, but it's worth talking about, right? So I just, this really speaks volumes to me about how we don't know what they don't know, right? And this could explain a lot about their misunderstandings. So, again, word listing, it doesn't seem that powerful. It doesn't seem that strong of a thing, but it is incredibly powerful. And it will help students to learn all the different ways that a certain morpheme will apply. So I've had students take word lists and see if they could write a whole paragraph using every word in the word list with a certain root. That's a fun thing. And then in the end, we want to read aloud. We want to make sure that they have an opportunity. If you are trained in phonics instruction, you know that it always ends with connected text. So they have an opportunity to repeatedly decode what you're working on. So we want to pre-teach the meaning and pre-teach the pronunciation because gosh, that's embarrassing when you mispronounce the word, right? And then once we've done that, we want to give them opportunities to see the words in connected text and have them read it aloud in an environment where they can get immediate corrective feedback, which I know sounds like a nightmare for middle school students and high school students, but it really, really is important. And for those who aren't reading aloud because they have an IEP, they have anxiety, they have dyslexia, it still benefits them to hear it. So, and do repeated reading. You can read it and then have someone read it again. At the end, it's really important to ask for understanding. I should have put that in a bullet point, but I didn't. But because in the end, that's what we want. All of this is with the goal of increasing understanding and comprehension. It's not just for the word, the fun of studying these word origins. We want them to understand better. We want them to be able to extract meaning from any text that they come across. And in summary, um, we only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to leave this summary slide up and ask if anyone has any questions. There's no point in me reading all of these because it's everything I already talked about. 6 minutes for questions. Whoops. Thank you. I guess I can go back to that slide.
Hey, Jennifer.
Oops, I'm going to stop now. I actually didn't. Hi. Wait, Keely, weren't you in the last one?
Yes, and I learned so much and was having a few technical difficulties.
Right. This one was better.
No, they were both excellent.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and what other, so your company, let's see, I wrote it down, is Mind Guide Learning. Is
Yeah.
that, so what other trainings, how can we get access to more training with this?
Um, I am I am an advocate, having been a Montessori teacher and sort of being somewhat self-made, of just go out there and find stuff. I mean, I wouldn't wait for looking for the perfect training opportunity. And there is no certification. There's no certification for structured word inquiry. It's just a method. So if you're concerned about doing it wrong, I would just let that go. And because really it's all about using resources to find the meanings of words. And you can use a dictionary, right? And if you do a Google search for structured word inquiry, you will find um, podcasts, you'll find YouTube videos, you will find, and several of them are listed in the Google Doc, which I put in the chat. Did you see that? Okay. So just click around in there and you shouldn't even need what I wanted to offer to all of you was the chance to not have to do that. So honestly, I feel like you could take all the resources that I put in that Google Doc, scan some of them, this weekend and use them on Monday. There's
Okay.
really no wrong way to do it.
So what all does your company do? Um,
So I started tutoring students who had dyslexia using the Orton-Gillingham method. And because I had a Montessori background, which most people, if they know Montessori, they understand it to be strong in math instruction, which it has very sensorial math. So then parents started asking me, can you do the math? So okay, then I started doing the math, and then I did a deep dive into dyscalculia and all that's out there to support kiddos with math learning differences, and there's not a lot out there. And that's a whole other thing. So we basically work with students who have dyslexia. We work in Orton Gillingham, and then often students want more after Orton Gillingham. So we'll do something like this. And then we help students build basic numeracy skills. So we do remediation
yeah.
in math. We're a tiny little company. It's me, my partner, and I think right now we only have three contractors. And the most we've ever had is like I think five contractors. So because I love teaching more than being a business person.
Yeah, yeah.
So I spend all my time with my students, and it just has sort of been holding steady where it is for a while. But it's fun, and sometimes people come to me and they want to, be a contractor, and that I don't really do a lot of advertising, and it's kind of amazing how it just sort of floats itself. Yeah.
I taught high school math for 23 years, and now I'm a K through 12 mentor coach, and I'm for everything, and I'm getting my reading endorsement. And so I'm just on a lot of learning curves here. But I've been really drawn to morphology and how it can help, especially older students,
Hmm.
spelling. But there's such a learning curve to it. And so just
Sure.
even get tutoring on how to help others with it.
Hmm. You'll find some lists in the word mapping resource. It has lists so that you can begin to work with. It's not hierarchical at all, right? Just look at the content that they're teaching. So if you're doing, if you're doing biology, look for those word parts that have to do more with biology. It's just that way. Just whatever it is that you're teaching, look at the words. Let the words tell you what to teach. Let the words tell you where to start. And then do your own word mapping and word matrixing and see, okay, is this something that's a good example of morphology, or is it just a little too obtuse?
Yeah.
And pick them that way.
My dad was a high school language arts teacher and actually used to do some like Freyer models and like linear line. I see what, so it's just a matter of just kind of start where you're at and keep growing it.
Exactly. And I think it's older children like it because it doesn't feel babyish, right? So you could take the word synesthesia, right? And because syn, is a prefix. And that's not something you're going to learn in lower elementary. That's not so, then we're looking at synopsis. We're looking at synonym. We're looking at, and those are, yeah, we're going to be gone in a minute, but those are things that help them to feel more sophisticated, right? And if, our kids are losing love of complex language. Let's just put it that way. I mean, our words, what what is the word that they are abbreviating it? Sus, right? We can't even say suspicious anymore. We're saying sus. And so that kind of thing, right? Let's help them learn that CIOUS is actually a part of a word that has meaning as and importance. Like, let's study. You could even bring that up, they would think it was funny, right? How come no one says the whole word suspicious anymore? Let's find words that end in S as CIOUS, like luscious, right? Precious. Is that right? Precio. Yeah. So,
I love how you're talking about professional language.